unfortunately, we've only had Vietnamese translation, but we'll move on. So we're better working together. Now, today's topics, this is what we're going to cover. We're going to look at how we can develop your child's motivation for learning, the importance of talking to your child at home and how to do that, the importance of you reading to your children or with your children. Now, this is an important one, the benefits of home language. That is the first language, and you are the experts on how you can develop that at home. And making sure, actually, that your child is ready for learning every day. Now, these are not just things that apply to EAL children. This applies to EAL to all children and their parents. So, who works with your children? And this is our wonderful EAL team, which I'll get you to stand up, please. These ladies and gents support your children and work with the mainstream class teachers very closely. We have Mr. John Lee, who works in Year 3, Mr. Robert Glover, Year 3, Mr. Josh Dale, who works across 3 and 4, Miss Rachel Pelham, Year 4, Miss Pauline Tran, Year 5, Miss Erica Barkthorpe, Year 6, myself, Year 6 and Secondary, and we also have 2 fantastic TAs who do a sterling job for us, Miss Wan and Miss Teen there. Okay. Without further ado, I'll call Miss Erica and Miss Rachel to come up and talk to us about motivating your children.
Yes. Hey, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today I'm going to talk to you about how you can motivate your children more and the types of motivation all children have. So every child and adult actually has 2 types of motivation. One comes from the outside and comes from grades, money, sweets, candies, video games, and the other one comes from within. And that's when someone is proud of what they've actually done, of the task that they've achieved. And it means that they're curious and interested, they want to be creative, and they want to do the task again and again to challenge themselves. This is called intrinsic motivation. And the focus is not on the grade or the reward, but on the task itself. Studies have shown that intrinsic motivation is the most effective way for your child to be more successful in life. When they are motivated from within because they enjoy the task or because they take pride in it, then they will want to do those things even better indefinitely. Many teachers have done lots of studies to see how different rewards and different things affect this type of inside motivation. They tried to give students rewards like chocolate or candy. They tried to give students rewards like ribbons or trophies. And they also tried to give them rewards like screen time, iPads, iPhones, video games, computers. All of these studies show that they either decrease the inside motivation or have no effect at all. None of those are the most effective way to help your child. The study found that what you say and how you say it is the most effective way for supporting your child in life. And this is done simply through positive praise and feedback. And now Miss Erica is going to talk to you about ways you can increase the interest in a topic so that that can help to motivate your child more.
Thank you, Ms. Rachel, and good morning, everybody. Children are far more engaged and eager to learn when the topic is one of interest. It's important, where possible, to allow your child to have control of their own learning experience, and a good way to do this is to give your child options. Reading and writing practice can be practiced with any topic. It could be an interview with a favourite singer, a newspaper article about dinosaurs, it could be an explanation text on how to play their favourite sport, or a short story about monsters. The reading or writing around any topic will be, the skills practice will be the same. English TV shows and movies and games are also an excellent way for your child to pick up new vocabulary, practice listening skills, and improve their pronunciation. Of course, it's not always possible to give them complete freedom, but the more input you're able to give them into their learning experiences, the more empowered they'll feel, and as a result, this will increase their motivation and desire to learn. Help with homework or help at home. And today I want to talk to you about instruction versus education. Our natural instinct when we see a child struggling with something is to jump in with the answer and help them. Instruction is telling your child what to do and how to do it, and education is guiding them to the correct answer. It's allowing them to become more independent and fulfill their potential. You play a vital role in giving your child the encouragement and courage that they need to do this and to help develop their study skills. If your child gets stuck, don't rush in with the answer. Give them time to think about it. You can ask them questions to guide them to where they need to be. Can they look it up in a dictionary? Can they look through their workbook? Can they do some internet research? Give them time to think about it, digest it, discuss it, and come to the conclusion themselves. And giving your child the opportunity to work through problems this way and allowing them to make mistakes also gives them a much higher sense of pride and achievement, as well as allowing them to process what they've learned and develop their higher order thinking skills. And a little proverb that I like: tell me and I'll forget, show me and I may remember, involve me and I'll understand. Okay. As I mentioned before, making mistakes can be a good thing and is often part of the learning process. When you do wish to correct your child, try to avoid correcting them in the middle of speaking or writing or correcting every single mistake. This can have a negative effect on their learning and make them feel like they're really terrible at English, which in turn leads to a lack of motivation and effort. If you feel they've made an important mistake and it does need correcting, wait until they finish speaking or writing, and then highlight the mistake and see if they can correct it themselves, because they often can. Additionally, focusing on strengths is another form of positive reinforcement. This will motivate them to keep learning. Focusing on weaknesses can cause distress, discouragement, and a lack of desire to learn. Was there punctuation weak on a piece of writing? Recognise it, discuss it, correct it together, but then congratulate them on a really interesting new word they used or some really beautiful presentation of their work. This will keep your child feeling positive about the subject and make them excited to share their work with you. Finally, ask them to teach you what they learned in EAL today. This shows a real interest in their learning and allows them to put the lesson into their own words and helps to strengthen what they have learned. I'm now going to pass you back to Miss Rachel, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about praise.
Thanks, Erica. Okay, so as I said in the beginning, what you say and how you say it is the most effective way to increase the inside motivation within your child. So here are some things that you might say and things you should avoid saying if you want to increase this type of motivation. So when speaking to your child at home, avoid saying things like, "If you finish your homework, I will buy you a new game." This focuses on what happens after they've done it and not what they're actually doing in their homework. Avoid encouraging them to say everything in English. Speaking in your home language is just as effective in many ways for how you process information and can help them with their English when they speak in their home language. So I am happy when you get good grades at school. Again, the focus becomes on the result and not the actual task. These are some things that we recommend saying to your student or child to increase their motivation. You can say, "Look how far you've come. I'm very proud of you. I can really tell you care about learning English. You have such clear handwriting." That is a creative idea, or even you are really fully focused on your work. This encourages your child to do these things even more and hopefully even better. The more they're encouraged by you, the more they want to do it again. And this will carry on with them their whole lives, hopefully. Bear in mind, when you're giving positive praise, you should should do it within 5 seconds of whatever your child has done. Whatever they've done that you're praising them for, do it within 5 seconds. And always, always, always remember, do not offer physical rewards, because as the study showed earlier, it has no effect on their intrinsic inside motivation. Okay, now we're going to hear from Mr. John and Mr. Rob about what else you can do at home with your child.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mr. John, and the topic of my section of this presentation and Mr. Rob's is the importance of conversation in the home language. And the reason we call it in the home language is because bilingual children often make the most progress. And having a good command of their mother tongue, their home language, is just as important as being fluent in English, and in fact will support the English language learning. Now, of course, we all speak to our children every day. We don't live in silent houses. But what we're talking about today is the importance of good quality, two-way conversation between the child and parent or another older family member. Here is a quote that I found that I quite liked. It's by an educator and businesswoman called Jane Nelson from the USA. And she said that children will listen to you only after they feel listened to. Now, today Mr. Rob and I are going to talk about why it's important to have two-way conversations with your child, how you can create opportunities for this, and what practical ideas you can use at home. So, research from Harvard and MIT have shown that two-way conversations is one of the best things that you can do for your child. It has a huge impact on their development and their learning. Now, it can even grow their brains. It can make new connections in their brains. It helps with language development, both in the home language and in English. It can improve test scores, improve their speaking and writing skills, of course increase their vocabulary, and it also is great for their self-esteem and their self-confidence to feel like they're being listened to and that they're participating in conversation with their family members. Now, we're all very busy people, so how do we make time for this? Well, it only takes 10 to 20 minutes a day. Great times to have conversations with your children are at dinner times, during family activities such as a walk, and at bedtime, perhaps before a bedtime story or after a bedtime story. And we recommend that you make certain times of the day, such as meal times and bedtimes, screen-free zones to avoid distractions. Mr. Josh will talk more about screen time later, but it would certainly be beneficial to have screen-free time for 20 minutes at least every day to allow for family conversation. Now, these are some things that you can do to encourage your child to take part in conversations and improve their conversational skills. Encourage your child to think before speaking. Children often say the first thing that comes into their mind, even if it's not very sensible. So allow for some thinking time before they speak. Encourage your child to speak in full sentences. It's natural for children and adults to just give the easy answer, to say one or two words. But in fact, it's great training for them for school and for life to be able to speak in full, correct sentences. Finally, encourage your child to extend their speaking with because, to support their answers. Again, this is a very important skill both for school and for life. Other things you can do is encourage your child to use ambitious vocabulary. A lot of children in their home language often only know everyday vocabulary. So try in Korean or Vietnamese or whatever your home language is to encourage your child to use higher level, more academic vocabulary in their first language. Encourage them to speak clearly and confidently, to use a loud voice. And if it's appropriate in your culture, encourage them to make eye contact, or at least to look at the person that they're speaking to. And removing distractions such as iPads and computers and phones will really help with this. And another thing that's important for children to develop their conversation skills is to encourage them to take turns. Children often don't really listen to the other person, they're just really waiting and in a rush for their turn to speak. So encouraging patience and turn taking is very important as well. I'm now going to hand over to Mr. Rob, who's going to give you some more general advice and also suggest some practical activities in which you can incorporate conversation at home. Mr. Rob.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Right, morning ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming today. So one of the things I think is really important is you need to ask your child lots and lots of questions with how and why. The reason this is important is because it helps to keep the conversation going, but also it allows your child to think a little bit more deeply before they speak. The next thing is you need to make sure that you help your child to focus. Always make sure they're paying attention when they are talking to you. So they need to be looking at you when you are involved in your conversation. You don't want them looking away or looking down at the floor. You must make eye contact with them. Another important thing is you must allow plenty of time for them to reply. As we've said, we want children to think carefully before they speak. So I think allowing a few seconds thinking time can be very valuable. Of course, always encourage polite speaking and good manners. I'm well aware that and I'm sure that you all do this, but having good manners will help your child to fit in any place, any situation, whether it's at BIS, whether it's at home, whether you take them out for a social occasion. It's always good to have polite manners. Okay, so basically they can use phrases such as thank you, I'm sorry, please, excuse me. And we encourage this, of course, in BIS. Okay. Now, as Rachel mentioned earlier, praise is also very important because it encourages your child and also motivates them. So I think it's important that you encourage that that they answer with that you can say to your child, well done or good job. Okay, it really helps them and motivates them. Finally, you are the best. You are your child's first teacher, and I think you are the best model for their home language. Okay, so please remember that. Now, let's have a look at some practical ideas that you can do with your child at home. I would like to mention that my wife is Vietnamese, and so my child is bilingual, so he switches between Vietnamese and English at home. All these activities are things that he does in Vietnamese and in English. Of course, at the top of the list, I've got reading. I try to spend at least 20 minutes a day reading with my child before he goes to bed. There are countless benefits to reading, and Pauline and Josh are going to talk about this in a little bit more detail later on in their presentation. Another thing my child loves doing with me is painting. So when he's painting, I ask him lots of questions about the pictures that he's painting, and I also get him to explain his choices. Why did he paint this particular object or this particular building? Another favourite of my child is Lego, and I think all children love Lego. I don't know anyone that doesn't. So when we're sitting together on the floor with all his box of Lego spread out everywhere, we discuss what pieces we need and also how to make the buildings taller and stronger. Finally, I'd like to mention, well not finally, I'd like to mention cooking. Now, I'm not very good at cooking, but my wife, being Vietnamese, is a very, very good cook. So, she is now teaching him how to cook very basic Vietnamese food. So he's learning the vocabulary for the ingredients, for the cooking utensils, for the recipes. Of course, it's very simple because he's only 6 years old, but it's wonderful to see. Now, we're going to do a little role play activity. Now, one of you is going to be the parent, and the other person is going to be the child. So what I want you to do first of all is, can you make sure you're sitting next to somebody? Can I ask you two to sit together? Would that be okay? Have you got a partner? This is very important. We need to have a partner. Okay, we're okay? Most people? Yeah? Okay. Now, if you come from the same country, you can speak in your home language. However, if the person next to you is from a different country, you need to speak in English. That's right. Okay. So one of you is the parent, and one of you is the child. So I'd like you to quickly discuss who is the parent, who is the child with your partner. You've got 5 seconds.
You're going to be like children now.
You're going to be like children. Ready? Okay. I think that's enough time. Okay. Now, you ready? Okay, listen carefully. 3, 2, 1. Ready? Time's up. Now, put your hands up if you often look at Seesaw. Hands up. Can I have a show of hands? Who looks at Seesaw? Everybody does. I know you do. Now this is a piece of work that a child made. This is a year 3 student. This is something, the children have been learning about different art styles. This is a lovely piece of art that they produced. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. Now your challenge is to talk about this piece of artwork for 60 seconds with your partner. You are going to ask lots of questions with how and why. So if you are the parent, you must ask questions with how and why. And you've really got to keep this going for 60 seconds or more. I will tell you when to start, and I'll also tell you when to stop. Are you ready? You think you can do it? Yep. I'm going to count down. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, everybody, time's up. Okay. Okay. So now you can see how easy it is to actually have a really good conversation with your child. And I couldn't even shut you up. You kept going for more than a minute. I think you could speak for 5 minutes. So the idea is to speak for as long as you can with your child, basically. Ask lots of questions. Now I'm going to pass you over to Mr. John, who's going to give you some more practical tips. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rob. Okay, so Seesaw is a great springboard for conversation at home. Another one that I want to talk about is questions with if. Questions with if are a great opportunity to have a conversation with your child. They encourage speculation, which is imagining different situations, imagining the future, which is a great academic skill. And they're a lot of fun as well. They can be very creative and imaginative. Now, I've written 4 if questions on the board. 3 actually. Took 1 away. Number 1, if you were the president, what laws would you make and why? Number 2, if you could have 1 superpower, what would it be and how would you use it? Question number 3, if you could pick any creature for a pet, well, first of all, what would it be, but how would you care for it? Now, In a moment, we're going to role play this question again. But before we do, just very quickly tell your partner which of these 3 questions would your child enjoy talking about. So very quickly, just 10 seconds. Please tell your partner which one your child would like. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Okay. Wow. This conversation thing is really infectious, isn't it? We just can't stop you talking today, which is wonderful. Okay. What I'd like you to do now is, with the same partner as in the previous activity, you're going to role play one of these questions for 60 seconds. Could you switch roles? So if you were the child before, now you're the parent. If you were the parent before, now you are the child. So, I'm going to give you 60 seconds to talk about one of these questions. Parents, keep the conversation going with how and why questions. Children, try to use because to extend your answers. So 60 seconds, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, please start. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. So if questions are great, as you can see. So maybe perhaps on your way home today, you might want to think of an if question or two, or borrow one of these to try out tonight with your child. Now, we're coming to the end of our section of the presentation. There are lots of ideas online. If you simply Google conversation starters for children, then there are lots of websites full of ideas for conversation topics and starters for home. And also, we'll be putting the video from today's presentation and more ideas and resources on our EAL blog. Miss Pauline will talk more about the EAL blog later. So that's the end of our section. I'm now going to hand over to Miss Pauline and Mr. Josh, who are going to talk to you about the importance of reading. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. John. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for coming. Today, we're going to talk about why you should read with your child and how to do it. Now, reading is incredibly important for your children, not just for their English language learning, but also for all of their educational development. Now, in a little while, I'm going to give you some ideas about how you can do it. But first of all, Ms. Pauline is going to tell you all about why it is so important.
Hi everyone. Can I just see a show of hands if you remember your mum or your dad ever reading to you when you were a child? I remember my mum reading to me a lot. Great, a few hands, that's fine. Well, did you know that a child who reads or is read to 20 minutes every day learns nearly 2 million words every year? Let's have a look at 3 different children. So child A reads 20 minutes a day, child B reads 5 minutes a day, and child C reads probably 1 minute a day. The difference 20 minutes makes is less than 2 million words a school year, whereas child B only learns at least 282,000 words a school year. However, child C only learns 8,000 words a school year. And the amount of reading impacts their scores in their test. So child A would score better than 90% of their classmates, child B better than 50%. However, child C would only score better than 10% of their classmates. So out of these three children, who would you expect to read better? Who would you expect to know more? Who would you expect to write better? Who would you expect to have better vocabulary? And who would you expect to be more successful in school and life? And how do you think each student would feel about themselves as a learner? Confident or not confident? So in the next few slides, you'll see the benefits of reading with your child for just 20 minutes every day. So, when your child reads by themselves, they're using a lot of brain energy to break down the sounds in words, and to read tricky words, and to learn all this new vocabulary from their text. These are all very difficult processes, so which leaves very little brain space for your child to enjoy the story or to understand the story. But when you read aloud to your child, you're decoding for them. You deal with the words and the tricky vocabulary. So this means your child's free to think so that they can use all their brain energy to imagine the story and learn new information. When you read aloud to your child, you teach them that words can come alive in their brains. They learn to pause, to wonder, to think, to ask questions about the world. You have the power to give your child access to these stories, to these books, ideas and information that they might not get anywhere else. Reading aloud gives you and your family a chance to look up from your screens, from your phones, from your computers. It gives you a chance to connect with your child just by reading and talking with each other. So when we read to your children aloud at school, the children are all sat together. We're teaching them how to talk together, to listen together, and how to look at each other in the eye. You can also build the same skills and connectedness at home with your child when you focus your attention by reading with them at home. Even if your child would rather be on their phones or on their laptops, when they can't sit on your lap, when they're 8, 9 or 10 years old, or when they're not willing to share as much information with you anymore, you can still use a book to build this relationship with your child and talk about world experiences and issues. So when you make reading with your child an enjoyable routine, your child will look forward to these moments with you, and which in turn help your child see reading as a really positive experience. And when your child learns and enjoys these experiences, your child will begin to read more and more by themselves. And as you know, most of a child's learning is done from reading books. The better a child can read, the easier it will be for them to learn what they need to learn in school. So a lot of studies have shown that a child who reads a lot will have a larger vocabulary, which then leads to academic success throughout the whole school life. Okay, so your child may already be an independent reader. However, reading aloud to them still has a lot of benefits and impacts on their independent reading. So reading develops a good habit of focus and concentration compared to an iPad or computer screens. It boosts their memory. So to understand the story, they have to remember the characters or the setting or parts of the story. And with reading comes comprehension and analytical thinking skills. They have to make predictions and challenge themselves to think of other possibilities in the story. You're also helping them to develop useful communication skills as they observe the interactions between the characters in the story. Your child will be exposed to lots of new vocabulary and different topics which they might not hear every day, and this therefore promotes achievement in all subjects, not just in English. So children who are good readers tend to achieve better across the whole curriculum. And the Telegraph have provided evidence that if your child is read to for just 20 minutes every night, their reading age can improve from 2 years to just 5 months. And that's all it takes. And so we can see these positive effects of reading to your child with a student at BIS. So this student is a Korean student, 9 years old. He started at BIS in Year 3 as a very, very low Tier 1 and currently is in Year 5 as a Tier 3. night he reads with his parents, and he's gotten into the habit of learning new words from his story and writing them into his diary. So he's got them in English and in Korean, and he does this every single night. And if you look at his diary, every page is filled with words. And so he's using this time with his parents and they're learning new words together. So this was his first reading test in term 1 when he was in year 5, and he scored 23 out of 50. Okay. A few weeks ago we did another reading test and he scored 40 out of 50, which is a huge improvement just in his reading, but also across all the other subjects. So what happens when you don't read to your child? Well, reading becomes a really hard job for them. They don't want to do it anymore. They begin to read because they're told to and not because they want to. They no longer see reading as enjoyable, and the joy of reading pretty much disappears. As they begin to dislike reading, they start to dislike learning, which is not what we want. So a study has shown that parents play the most important role in development and educational performance of their children. So the benefits of reading to children can still be seen at the age of 10 to 11 years old. It should not stop when they're in the foundation stage. And it continues to be beneficial for the rest of their lives. As you can see from this graph here, less children read for enjoyment as they get older, because during this age here, parents begin to stop reading with their child. And as they stop reading, children become less interested and they stop reading altogether. So your child spends 7,800 hours at home compared to 900 hours at school. Which is the best place, do you think, will help with your child's learning? So just remember, you're never too old or too wacky or too wild to pick up a book and read to a child. And remember that your child is never too old to be read to. So Josh is now going to explain how you can develop these really good reading habits with your child.
Okay, thank you very much, Pauline. Okay, so I'm going to tell you just a few ideas about how you can read with your child. If you feel like you're not exactly sure how to do it, don't worry, okay? I'm going to give you just a few things to think about. First of all, you don't have to be a teacher, okay? You can just pick up a book and go. There's no preparation. You don't have to read it beforehand. You don't have to be an expert when you're reading with your child. Who's confident with their English? Who's really good at speaking English here? I hope these guys. But if you're not, then don't worry, because as John and Rob were saying, your home language is just as good for your child's English language learning. So you can read a book in your home language. You could read an English book, but talk about it in your home language. Really, your home language is going to help just as much. Another big obstacle, some people might say, well, where can I find 20 minutes every day? Because that's what you need to do. Well, I think you can. This is a study from 2017, which said that 139 minutes a day, that's what our children are spending on screen time. That's either iPads, it could be YouTube, or watching TV, or something like that. We're even worse. This is just for our phones. This is the latest information, 215 minutes a day on our phones. So actually, finding that 20 minutes shouldn't be too difficult. I'm not asking you to throw away your phones, of course. You can use them, but I will tell you a different way that you can use them later. The most important thing for everybody is have fun. Reading time is fun time, okay? There's no pressure. There's no right or wrong answers when you're reading with your child. And it should just be like watching a movie together, watching your favorite TV show. It's exactly the same. So it's a really good chance to bond, as Pauline was saying, really enjoy that special time with your child while you can. It's as easy as 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to talk you through just 3 stages for when you're reading with your child. I have this handout here, so don't worry if you can't remember everything. I will leave it at the back of the room, so please take one before you leave. First of all, before reading. I've got a book here, The Tunnel. It's a very famous book. A lot of our children really love this book by Anthony Brown. This is just one example of the many books that we read here at BIS. Children love to just dive in. They want to read the book straight away, but don't let them do it, okay? First of all, you can talk about the book together. Look at the cover, okay? Read the title together. Look at the picture and ask them questions about it. So, what can you see in the picture? What does the title mean? What could this story be about? Ask them to predict what they think will happen. Even now, don't open the book, turn it over. Have a look at the back of the book. We have this, it's called the blurb. Read the blurb together. Were they correct? Would they like to change their mind? Maybe now they think something different. So even just before you start reading, it's got a lot of ideas in your child's mind about what they're going to be reading about, which will really help them to engage. During reading, so this is just an example of one page from The Tunnel. Just on one page, there's loads of things you can do. As you know, children get distracted very easily, okay? So it's really important that we ask them lots of questions to keep them focused and to keep them engaged. So what kind of questions can we ask them? Well, a good start is feelings. You can talk about the characters in the story. So how is he feeling or how is she feeling? Why do you think they are feeling like that? You can also talk about how your child feels about the story too. Another one we talked about already, prediction, thinking about the future. So again, don't turn the page. Ask your child first, what do you think will happen next? And of course, why? Other things you can do, a lot of our books have some really beautiful pictures. Now, children need pictures so that they can understand all of the words in the story. So look at picture clues, ask them about the picture. Whose hand is that, for example? Different voices. That's another really fun one, I think. So children need to understand who is talking and how they're talking. So when you read speech dialogue, for example, this one here, why not use a different voice or even a funny voice for your characters? This is an impatient mother. So it could be, out you go together, she said, and try to be nice to each other for once and be back in time for lunch. That's just one example. Have fun with it. New words as well. So when, for example, have a look on here. Is there any words you think might be a little bit challenging? Can you see that one there? Impatient, for example. So if you find new words together, don't worry if you don't know what that word is. You can find out the meaning together. I would recommend a junior dictionary. That's a really good tool to use. A junior dictionary will explain the word in a way that your child can understand. If you don't have a junior dictionary, don't worry. I know you have a smartphone. Does everybody have Google Translate? Google Translate is actually really useful. I don't know if you've used it before for reading, but for example, just this word impatient, not only can we find the meaning of the word, but also we can listen to the word as well. If you press this icon here, you can listen to that word so you can hear the correct pronunciation. If you even want to test yourself or test your child, you can use this voice icon here. Record yourself and see if you can pronounce it correctly. So don't throw away the phones because they are actually quite after reading, of course, there's a lot more questions we can ask. So I don't want you to just close the book and move on. Ask your child questions about the characters. Which character did they like or dislike? And why? This is the most important question you're going to ask your child. Why? We want to encourage them to think as much as they can, as John and Rob were saying. So, every time they answer, don't let them just give you one word. Ask them to explain why. Use because. You could also ask them how they feel about the story. Did they like it? Did they feel sad or did they feel angry about what happened? As Pauline was saying, new words as well. So you could reflect on any new words that you read in the story. Maybe you could even write them down in a diary or in a notebook. This is what I think is most important for you to think about as well. What next? So what are you going to read next? Would you like to read another book from the same author? Maybe they even want to read the book again. and that's fine too. You can still learn a lot from reading the same book multiple times. Before I go, as I said, that's how to do it. If you have any of these problems, for example, no books on the shelf, or if you really can't get that iPad away from your child, well, don't worry, because we still have something for you. Anybody familiar with Reading Express? All of your children should have it. They all know how to log into it. When they log in, they can actually use this library section to find books. There's loads of books on there. You go into this little library here, there's loads of different categories that you can find books. It's not famous books that we all know, but there are a lot of really good resources on here that your children will love. So by all means, use Reading Express. Another thing, I don't have a slide for it, but is our library in school. So you may know that all children are allowed to take 2 books from the library every week. Parents are also welcome to come to the library either before or after school to read with their children. And it's really lovely to see. We have a lot of parents doing that. I would encourage you to do that. We even have home language books now as well. So you can find some books in your own language that maybe you don't have access to. Finally, Miss Pauline, would you like to say something about the book?
Yes, so everything that you've heard today can be found on the blog. The reading section particularly will give you lots of information how you can read and why you should read, as well as all the other information that you've heard will be under the parent section of the blog. So feel free to take a photo. Our web link is also on the whiteboard in case you missed this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. And yes, if you want to take a handout, I will leave them on the table at the back. Thank you.
Right, my final bit is really all about what else can you do on top of the ideas that you've been given. Let me talk about after-school tutoring. Now, I've talked about this before. It is something that has been discussed in the educational world. Now, with reference to primary school children, after-school tutoring has a 0 impact on their learning, on their progress. And that's not just me saying it, that's a lot of educationalists. For example, Dr. Virginia Rojas, who I had the pleasure to listen to a few years ago, who's an expert on this kind of thing, she actually said that. At the same time, actually, it's not great for your child's health as well. You know, they've been at school all day long, it's tiring, and head teachers and teachers are not great fans of after-school tutoring. Moving along, so what can you do? Well, as I said, after-school tutoring doesn't make a great deal of impact on your child's learning, okay, at primary levels. It does obviously have some impact at secondary level, especially when they do external exams like GCSEs. But studies have also shown recently that there is no difference in exam results from those children who go to after-school tutoring and those who don't. So, save your money and save your children's time. Okay? What can you do? Well, as a lot of our teachers have said there, let them do some fun things. We have a lot of clubs at school. After-school clubs develop a lot of other skills that a child needs throughout their life. Better still, you do those fun things with them. Spend some time with your children, reading, you know, making things practical activities, that sort of thing. The next thing is make sure that your child gets enough sleep. Children need between 9 and 11 hours. A tired brain cannot learn. A tired brain cannot focus, okay? A child needs his or her sleep. Please, no phones, video games, computers before bedtime. As Josh and Pauline just said, one of the best things you can do is actually read with them. And please, get these out of the bedroom as well. We want a child who's relaxed when they've gone to bed. And the next day, avoid that. Create a calm morning routine where your child sits down to a relaxed healthy breakfast because it feeds the mind, it feeds the body, and it sets them up for the day.